Godājamie skatītāji, lai dzirdētu sarunas tulkojumu latviešu valodā, lūdzu uzlieciet austiņas, jo saruna būs angļu valodā. Paldies!
Hi, James. Hi, Hristo.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. On the behalf of the Baltic Pearl Film Festival, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight and speaking to all of us here tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So there were a number of security precautions that you had to take when making this film. Could you talk us through some of them and tell us why did you feel it was necessary?
Shall I start, Hristo?
Yeah, I think you are the only expert for this topic.
I mean, Hristo's been living it for a long time, but yeah, we were very conscious when we started the film, which originated as a film about poisonings by the Russian state, Vladimir Putin targeting his political opponents. So we took quite extreme measures. We were working in a kind of underground bunker, cut off from the rest of the world, communicating by encrypted apps, using code words, not even telling kind of close friends and family exactly what we were working on. And we'd kind of have moments of thinking, this is ridiculous. You know, no one cares what we're doing. This is all over the top. You know, we think we're far more important than we really are. And then halfway through filming, we discovered that, you know, a group of people had been following Hristo, the main collaborator and subject of the film, around the world for 3 years. So, you know, and in London, in the, you know, my hometown, the place where we were making this film. So, you know, we were actually at that time quite grateful we hadn't been complacent and we had taken these quite seemingly extreme measures, because it's until you find out about a plot, it's impossible to know. But I mean, Hristo has lived with this plot for far longer and in a far more serious way than I have.
Yeah, and I would also add that when we started filming, I was not really the main protagonist in the documentary. It was a whistleblower that we had helped escape from Russia, and it was extremely important that we keep his identity completely secret and his locations secret. And obviously that was what drove initially our paranoia about protecting everything about the film. None of the footage was shared by James remotely. Even I only saw the first draft, the first cut in when he physically brought the USB stick and showed it to me, because anything that was passed electronically might theoretically end up displaying the face of our whistleblower or other sensitive information that could not be made public before the film goes out.
Thank you. There have been a number of assassinations that have been linked to FSB and the Russian regime. Why poison? It does seem like some assassinations have been done by poison, but others have not. But the most high-profile ones seem to have this poison element.
I'll give you my version, my answer, and I'm sure James has by now a very metaphysical and artistic answer to why this is the preferred method. But it is the preferred method. It has been for a century at least, and maybe even longer. The attempts almost a century ago by the Russian KGB and its predecessor Vychikov they were obsessed with using poisons. I mean, they poisoned Stepano Bandera in Germany. They poisoned many of their own political dissidents in Russia or in the Soviet Union, and a lot of assassinations abroad took place with poison. I think it's a combination of two things. One is that poison always works. When it works and kills the person, it is usually a combination of deniability, because when it works well, you cannot really find traces in the body, but you know it's poison, but you can't prove it. And it's also a calling card, a scary calling card for the Kremlin. saying you can't prove it, but it's us, which works to intimidate and to deter dissident action. When it doesn't work, like in the case of the first time that they tried to kill Navalny in 2020, or in this case of the Skripals, or in the case of Vladimir Kara-Murza, who's one of the protagonists in this film, where they tried to kill him twice with poison. It didn't work, but it did send the message. It did send the message to others that this is what would happen to you if you continue. And poison has a much more, especially Novichok or anything that works on your nerves, on your nerve central system, has a much scarier sort of a message than a bullet to the head. A bullet to the head, you're dying. You don't know that you're dying. But with this particular type of poison, you are aware that you're dying. You're shouting. You have a sense of doom. It's something that was described by Alexei Navalny the first time that he was poisoned. And that sense of doom is something that the Kremlin wants you to have.
Yeah, I obviously agree with all that. And I think, what's interesting is it's also perfectly suited to Putin's personality. It has this long history, and they had these scientists who've spent decades developing sophisticated poisons. But alongside that, it also works perfectly for Putin, who is kind of the world's gaslighter in chief. He will tell you that white is black and black is white, and also take some sadistic pleasure from his opponent's suffering. And it is, for all the possibility that they might survive, it's a horrendous death when it does work. And so, I think probably just temperamentally, Putin loves the idea of poisoning opponents as well as everything else.
I mean, his biography, one of his biographies talks about his obsession with studying poisons that the KGB used historically when he was still in Germany. And again, you're right, James, he might just have a personal affinity to that cruel method of killing.
Why do this then? Putin's regime has been killing off and persecuting dissidents and journalists for many years now. And yet there are still many, including yourself, Hristo and James, that are still willing to speak truth to power. What is motivating you?
Well, for me, it's exactly that, the adrenaline rush from having a supervillain who has the whole state, a huge state, and natural resources behind him, fearing a journalist with nothing but a laptop. I mean, this is, it does give you an adrenaline rush, and it gives you a sense of purpose, much more than most other people will ever have in their lives. So of course, it's very tempting to continue doing that. And it's exactly this balance, this asymmetry, the David versus Goliath feeling of poking the bear, literally and figuratively here. I think that's enough to explain it, and it's enough to explain why a lot of our colleagues from Russia are doing this, in addition to the fact that they also want to have their country fixed, changed, and barbaric in the future. But for us non-Russians, it's, of course, there's a pragmatic desire to remove the danger of Russia, the risk of Russia, which is affecting each of our countries, like literally each of our countries, but also knowing how much they hate you and are trying to remove you physically gives you a meaning, gives you an understanding that you're effective, you're efficient. So how can you stop?
Yeah, and I think with the film, it's telling the story of Putin's kind of murder machine and understanding his psychology, how the state works in such a brutal way, but also highlighting the bravery of the people who do still continue to stand up and tell the truth about Russia, despite the obvious potential consequences. So, I think, and the title Antidote, I'll let you, watch the film and draw your own conclusions. But, there's a hope, there's a note of optimism in that as well, I would say, about, the continuing existence of people who do oppose Putin despite everything.
So what message would you like the audience to take away from this movie tonight then?
I mean, you know, it's not exactly breaking news that Putin is an evil psychopath, but I think, you know, really understanding the lengths he goes to, not only to target opponents, but their families, and this kind of nihilistic desire to punish people. And I guess the kind of the contrast between, you know, the handful of people that we follow and what they are willing to sacrifice and what their families go through, and the kind of horror of Putin. But as I say, you know, I think the fact that these people do exist and are continuing to work despite the risks is a cause for some hope. And I think, you know, even for people who may have questions about members of the Russian opposition, all of that, the best hope for peace and for a better, you know, brighter future for Ukraine, brighter future for Europe is the end of Vladimir Putin. And so understanding that someone like Vladimir Kara-Murza, who, you know, has risked his life on numerous occasions to continue fighting to tell the world about Putin and the danger he poses, you know, I think they're worthy of our admiration. And someone like Hristo as well, you know, is still every day taking great risks to do the work that he does.
Thank you very much, James and Hristo. We will open the floor to questions from the audience now.
Hello, guys. Will you investigate the second poisoning of Alexei Navalny? I know it's hard. I know it's maybe near to impossible because it happened in an incarceration place, in such a distant place where the information flow is highly limited. But still, like, is there any chance to succeed?
There is a very, very high chance that it would succeed. I've said several times that this is a much more difficult investigation, as you suggested, because of the fact that the previous investigation actually are informing and instructing the Kremlin how to hide their traces better. But that's a known price of our transparency of our investigations. And also, indeed, it happened in a very remote place where which was part of the planning for this to be hidden from journalists and from investigators. This fact that they did it in a very remote place also brings certain disadvantages, because by tracing the few people who flew into this very remote location before and after, as long as this information becomes available, it is relatively easy to pinpoint the potential culprits. The Navalny Foundation team, the FBK, are working on this investigation. They've actually invited several key journalists from other media, to help and to advise. I've also agreed to advise them. I will not jump the gun and give advance information, because it's something I would leave to the foundation and to the family to decide when the right moment is. But I can assure you that I'm very optimistic that the full truth will be known before long. And I'm not just being optimistic. I know that I have a reason to be optimistic.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Hristo Grozevu. And first of all, thanks for your huge job. And my questions is, are you think that Putin is a problem? I think that 2 days ago, Solovyov said that if Putin's not finish war with win, maybe somebody next come after Putin. Yeah, and I think KGB is a very huge machinery, and okay, Putin's dead, but what's next?
I know this theory, but I disagree with it because I think Russia is a mafia state. The KGB is a mafia, the FSB is a mafia. Everywhere in the world where we've looked at mafia structures and how they change over history, at some point the people at the top of the mafia want to begin living a normal life because they want their children to be walking down the street without being shot out by competing mafia groups. They want their relatives to be able to travel to nice places like London, Nice, and Paris, and Riga, and not to travel to Sochi and Krasnodar and have vacations only in Dubai. This is an active problem for Putin because even though he wants this war to continue for as long as possible and to maybe even get into a nuclear conflict with the West, because he has gone completely crazy and he wants to remain in history as the Tsar who challenged NATO. This is not true for most of the elite around him. They're terrible people. They're people who made their billions on theft and torture and assassinations in the 90s and 2000s. But they're at a point in their life, in their graduation from mafia to people that they want to be just rich people, that a lot of other countries have gone through 100 years ago. And I do think that because of that, the system will not allow another crazy nutcase like Putin to take over. They will pretend to be democratic. They will pretend to be to want peace with the world because they want to improve their quality of life. So I cannot imagine how the system will allow another crazy to get the power that he needs. Putin has the power because he has locks on the finances, on the money of these oligarchs. But without Putin, there cannot be a new colonel or general who will have the same access to money as Putin does, money and power. That's why I don't think it can happen again.
Good evening, Hristo. My name is Lev Kadik. I'm the journalist from Delphi. What do you believe could be the implications of Nevzlin-gate scandal for the Russian political opposition in exile and also for the countries where the events took place? The two questions, and there will be the last one. I know that you read the message exchange on which the FBK investigation is based. I don't feel that you would tell us all that you read, but could you tell us how wide the story could get, because it's getting wider and wider? Can we expect any new, how do you say it, new revelations? Thank you.
It's a very time-appropriate question, Lev. The impact of this Nevzlin-gate on the opposition and the Russian diaspora is unprecedented. It divided it and will continue to divide it for a long time. Some of the division is based on the disbelief by many members of the opposition that this is true, that this really was Nevzlin paying people to kidnap, hurt, maybe even assassinate, but certainly beat up members of a competing political group. Others think that even if that were true, they don't like FBK, they don't like the Navalny group, they think it's a cult, maybe he had a right to do that. A third group thinks that even if that was true, and Nevzlin is a terrible human being, he's still useful because he has been funding a lot of anti-Putin efforts, while at the same time privately having obsessions and being a monster and going after competitors. So there's this confusion within the opposition, within the diaspora rather, that I feel, that I see on a daily basis. And I was sitting last week at a conference with very, very well-informed and respectable members of the Russian opposition abroad, and they were part of the first group. They didn't believe that this is proven beyond doubt, that this is really what Nevzin would have done. So I think a slight improvement, maybe 1/3 of the situation will be improved, will be fixed when some official investigation, like maybe the FBI, who are looking into this, maybe the Poles, maybe the Latvians together with the other 3 countries, and the Lithuanians who are also investigating it, come up with a very conclusive evidence saying, yes, this is true. And yes, we have to take criminal measures against Nevzin. If that comes out, at least this confusion, whether it's true or not, will disappear. And maybe more people will begin understanding why Maria Pevchik and the foundation had to come up with this publicity, which was not an easy decision. I can assure you, I was with them in the last days before they published. They did not sleep for several days, thinking about the consequences. What if there's a 0.1% chance that we are wrong? What will we do to the opposition? But what if we are right and we are not making it public and putting in danger even more people? So this was a choice they had to make. And they made, I think, a valid choice to disclose it because they had already fed the information to investigators around the world for 2 months before that, and there was still no action. So I think it's a very bad outcome, but there was no alternative. And for me, there was no alternative but to let the truth come out. But I'm hoping that very soon we'll get official confirmation or not, in which case everything becomes different. Yes, your other question was related to whether there's additional shockwaves. From what I've seen, yes, there's evidence of corruption in many East European countries or Central European countries, including in Latvia. There's evidence of media corruption where the group was, according to the chats, paying or agreeing with media owners to publish fake and discrediting information. It's the same. There are similar discussions about Poland. There are similar discussions about Lithuania. That corruption angle of it, that would allow an oligarch with many, many billions to corrupt the political system in a small country, is a systemic problem. And I think that's where we will see some more shockwaves come from these chats.
Vai kāds vēl grib?
Hello. Maybe you will have an answer in your movie, but do you have a theory why Navalny came back to Russia? I mean, he might assume that it was a death sentence for him, and that's why he did it.
I've answered this question many times, but the simple, shorter answer is he allowed for the possibility of being killed. He thought it was very realistic. But he also naively allowed for the possibility that many Russians will come to the streets, galvanized by his bravery, and will begin a series of protests that were possible in 2012 because we saw them. We saw the hundreds of thousands in the streets in 2012. What I think he miscalculated was he didn't know about the plans for a war. If he had known, and if the war had started at the time, he would never have gone back, because that changed everything. That, on one hand, eliminated any reputation cost for the Kremlin, so they didn't care anymore if they will kill somebody in jail, because they're killing tens of thousands of people per year, and in Ukraine, innocent women and children. And on the other hand, the repressive machine, because of the war, started working already a year before the war started to make impossible any expression of protest and dissent in the street. And again, that was a preparation for war. I really believe that if war had been known, or the plans for war had been known, or had started already, Navalny would have stayed outside, because so many millions of young Russians left the country. And he would have not been the odd one out. He would not have been the only person staying out of Russia. He would be one of the many, many millions who are against the war. But he didn't know that, and he made a crucial mistake.
Jautājumi? Paldies.
Paldies. Thank you, Hristo and James, for answering all of these questions. And thank you, James, for making the movie, and Hristo for telling us your story.
Thank you so much.
All right. So on the behalf of Baltic P蕨Film Festival, yeah, we bid you goodbye, and we'll start watching the movie.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.